delighted to have Dr. Marcus over here. A very, very warm welcome and good evening to find time. I know how busy schedules you have, but yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, this is really important because you have really traveled across, well-read, well-traveled. You have a book too, so we would like to know, of course, as we talk more, there's a lot of things to learn from you. So yeah, I'm moving ahead on the session today, which Kriti already talked about, which is, bridging the gap between technology and medicine. And we at OJAS Medtech BioNEST IIIT Hyderabad advocate all the time about how do we help medical professionals or how do we help medtech startups, because that's the mission we have, to take them and to help them from their ideation stage to the market ready. But then how do we do that? So T Health Cafe is definitely a platform where we where we talk about all this, the current challenges, emerging technologies. A lot of discussions happens, a lot of networking happens. So please do enjoy the next 50-60 minutes with Dr. Marcus. And moving ahead, Dr. Marcus, before moving to any other questions, the first question I would have for you, take us your journey of how all things has actually unfolded from a physician to an entrepreneur. What did you see? How did you choose to become an entrepreneur? I'm sure this must have been a very, very, transition moment. So what was your motivation towards that? If you can take us through the journey of your, life. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and welcome to everyone for joining in on a Tuesday evening. And if you're watching the recording of this, well, thank you for investing your time as well. I'm lucky. Right? I love one thing, which is human biology, and that has allowed me to do and wear many different hats in my career, which is zigged and zagged. But ultimately, it's always been around one central idea, which is how can I achieve the most that I can from this biological organic machine that I've been given by nature, this body and brain, and how can I help everyone I meet obtain the same degree of optimization as I can as well. So my career really started early in the research world. My first degree was actually in physiology. I was in the Royal Air Force at the time. And at that point in time, I was obviously getting a chance to work with fighter pilots. And that's where I suppose in many ways this idea came to be, because I saw firsthand how in such a confined, tight physical environment, literally being bombarded with tens of thousands of data signals every minute, a human being is able to make decisions with such surgical precision and such a degree of optimization and performance that many of us sitting in our homes or coffee shops or wherever else anyone is listening to me on this may have a challenge to do so. And that's when I first really began to fall in love with this idea of performance in extreme conditions. I got to do many different expeditions to Mount Everest, to the Arctic Circle. I was invited to work at NASA on the human spaceflight program. I did expeditions across the European Alps. And all of those were looking at different extreme environments. And it was the subject of my book, which has now become a bestseller here in India, and how we can take those learnings and apply it to our biology to show everyone that this machine of ours is not frail, it's not fragile, it's the opposite, it's anti-fragile. You can push it, it'll adapt, it'll then excel and be a stronger, better version of itself. So that's where the journey really began. I then went on to study medicine, graduated, was working as a doctor in the UK. And in that phase, it was then very much about pathogenesis, right? And I know there are many doctors on this call. I can see some of them, and I hope to interact with a lot of them as we go through. We as doctors, all of us, we call ourselves healthcare experts. But there's very little health in our care. Our profession has been designed around pathogenesis and disease. And of course, that's a very important problem to solve for humanity. But if we really want to move the needle significantly, we need more people like those who are joining us to take a step back and look at how we can address the upstream determinants of health, how we can really address the root causes for why people become sick in the first place through behavioral sciences, leveraging the power of digital personalized technology, in a scalable manner, which is affordable and accessible to every single one of the almost 8 billion people living on this planet. And that's where these little devices come in. So that then came my third phase of my career, which was as a management consultant, then as a venture capital investor, and now as an entrepreneur, really building and utilizing the power of digital media and technology to create sustainable change globally, which is focused on something Sonali and you share a passion for, which is longevity, extending the human lifespan, the human health span, and helping us all have happy, healthy, longer years through that process.
Okay.
So I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is such such a long journey. I got like really was thinking like you have traveled across, that's really wonderful that you got an opportunity to do so many things, and that's where I think the experience and the insight have come. So that would definitely help, for you to understand what exactly the gaps are in the technology and what are the gaps in the medicine, and how do you solve with technology, which actually brings me to the next question, which is, how do you see the future of medicine look like? We already, I think the pandemic has shown us quite a bit of the future. I think we are already ahead 5 years time in the future. We have never expected to see our doctors on a video consultation format. Like we never believed that we would be ready for that, right? Unless you go and have a very personalized touch with your doctor, you never trust anybody that who's giving you your who's talking to you and telling about your own health. But now we are already doing that. We are already living it. So but then this is I see this, and then what else you see in the future going to happen? So can you take us to on maybe from now on 10 years later, what's going to happen?
Yeah, so I gave a TEDx talk in India 5 years ago, in 2015 it was, where I described the future of health in the year 2030. And
some of them are actually holds true now. I was actually relating with your talk, like it was so true on, I think it was 2017 you talked about.
No, it would be earlier than that, but yeah, around that point in time.
So
yeah, 2016.
The pandemic coming, yeah. And we are all talking and
yeah, and in that, actually, one of the statistics that I gave was that by the year 2030, 90% of all consultations will happen with a computer. And I didn't mean virtually via one of the platforms. I actually meant with a computer doctor, right? And we're beginning to see a lot of that come into the fold. We've seen 10 years of digital transformation happen. In fact, in my work that I do now with Human Edge, I get an opportunity to talk with so many CEOs all the time. And I often ask them, what's been the biggest catalytic change in your organization? Is it your chief information officer? What is it that has led? And they said it's COVID. It's the lockdown. That's been the biggest digital transformation. So we're seeing it play out in so many ways. So yeah, definitely in terms of the low-hanging fruits, in terms of consultations, increasingly being augmented and substituted with computers and artificial intelligence. And when you think about it, and this is how I described it, what is a doctor? What has been and all the people who's here, your education of medicine is mainly an algorithmic learning paradigm where you match symptoms with pathology. And once you do that matching, you then know what treatment, investigation, and then treatment. That's all you learn, right? We all, as doctors, we're just learning tables and lists. Well, a computer can do that very easily. It can do it much better than we can, in fact, right? But what I was alluding to in that talk was that the problem we need to be careful of and design for is one around trust, the word you used, Sonali, which is because the doctor-patient relationship is a sacred one that goes back thousands of years. And the interaction that a doctor has with the patient is bidirectional. So we as the doctor, we're obtaining information from the patient, a clinical history, to then assimilate a differential diagnosis in our head. but the patient in return is receiving something else. They're returning the compassion, they're receiving the compassion, the empathy, hopefully the warmth as well, that bedside manner, which has an effect on the well-being of the individual beyond the placebo effect. So as we design, as entrepreneurs out there, design these platforms, we need to really think about how we bring that human relationship in, so that that trust is part and parcel of that, because trust is the currency by which this relationship thrives on. And if we don't have that trust, we're not obtaining the right degree of clinical information, we're not able to make the right differential diagnosis. So that was a big theme about the talk that I gave. And since then, of course, there's so many other things, right? We've now got molecular diagnostics, CRISPR-Cas9, obviously genetic tools available to us. We've got autonomous robots, which are entering into the surgical sphere increasingly so. We've got personalized and precision medicine, wherein it's no longer, and a friend of mine was recently going through a particular type of cancer. And so we're seeing now it's no longer about the organ, it's no longer about the tissue, it's no longer about the cell line, it's no longer about the receptor line, it's no longer about the epigenetics of that receptor. You can now target the actual mechanism that an individual patient has and design a set of chemotherapeutic agents to specifically target that particular agent of concern. So there's really a lot of different changes. And I know, of course, Sonali, you're part of the biohacking conference, and you've got all these different tracks where people can utilize technology to enhance longevity. So it's a pretty exciting world that we have for ourselves. And I think doctors are very, very well placed to be part of that change. You're on mute.
So, I mean, I know these all things we have read while even I was doing my PhD, what all we can do in terms of personalized medications and all. But how long you think that, I mean, of course, the digital health we are seeing now already happening. So do you see 2030, we would be realizing, something like a personalized chemotherapy where, it's just made for that single individual having a very, very a specific mutation, as you talked about?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Bill Gates says it best, where we overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years, just because of the compounding effect. And Moore's law is so applicable to everything we're doing. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think the biggest challenge we have in society is the alignment between payer and provider. It's that financial investment. If you look at something which is very dear to my heart, which is metabolic disease, and how I'm looking at longevity, right? You look at the simplest, most powerful tool that we have available to us as doctors is nutrition. In med school, when I was studying there almost 20 years ago, I had one lecture on nutrition. Everything I know now and how I manipulate nutrition in my own life, the people I coach, the people I treat, is based on my extended learning that I've done in the last 10 years extensively myself, right? For example, diabetes is not a disease of sugar, it's a disease of insulin, right? We've completely misunderstood what a calorie is. A calorie is not a calorie. There are different types of calorie. And how you absorb a calorie versus how you burn a calorie is very different for different people. Sugar is the devil. Fats are actually very, very good for you. But we've all been taught that fats is bad for you and we should have a high carbohydrate diet and a high protein diet, etc. So there are so many fundamental fallacies around nutrition, but Hippocrates knew that let medicine be thy food and let food be thy medicine. But you look at the investment in food-related nutritional sciences in the US, it's under $1 billion a year, right?
I don't think we have a nutraceutical understanding per se in India. I mean, if you look at the nutraceutical products, right, there is no, in fact, I know it very, I know it very clearly for sure, because I was something involved in a nutraceutical product, and then the regulation itself is so gray. Nobody knew that what sort of regulatory approvals are required for a nutraceutical to come to market. I mean, it's like, wow, I mean, are we in 2020? which is already a very, very developed market in US and in UK, I believe.
No, absolutely. And nutraceuticals are so important because if you look at the chemical composition of soil, and I recently had the opportunity to interview Professor Bonnie Kaplan on my show, The Edge. She and I were talking about micronutrient in soil compositions in North America. And over 50% of all the, they took 4 soil samples across Canada. And in every single soil sample, the level of micronutrient was under 50% of the recommendation requirement. In fact, magnesium was the lowest. I think it was less than 5%. And this means that the food we're eating doesn't have the micronutrients that we require to be absorbing on a day-to-day basis. We're so fixated with macronutrients, we've forgotten that the catalyst of substrate utilization in our biochemistry at the mitochondrial level are those 30 micronutrients. And that's why I take 17 supplements every day, right from the omegas through magnesium, calcium, vitamin B. Even in this glass of water here, I've got 600,000 units of vitamin D. And I make sure I take 1 sachet every 3 days. For my immunity, etc. So we all need to be really looking at our micronutrient, and supplements is something which is important, but there are no rules around it. Anyone can start producing it. It's become a cowboy industry, and anyone who's a social media influencer is propagating them without really understanding the benefits and how you should be taking them. So there's so much work to be done in this space.
Yeah, agree. So let's go back to our technology thing. I mean, I say, since we do have a couple of doctors over here, what would be, what do you think? I mean, we are already seeing there's an exponential innovations happening on the technology side. So what should our doctors, what sort of skill sets they would need to stay ahead of the curve as when they are doing, either in the when they are student or in practicing as medical professionals. So how do they skill themselves? I mean, today also I see, even in digital health also, right, I'm not sure that many of them are actually equipped to give a teleconsultation, what format is required. So how do you see they should be moving ahead as the technology is moving?
Yeah, I remind people, if you're not staying at the innovative edge, you're going to be left behind. And please don't think that just because you're a doctor and you've spent 5-6 years at university that you're not replaceable. We're all replaceable. There is computers that are increasingly doing more and more things, and they will only get more and more smarter. The point of singularity was meant to be 2030. It may be 2025, 2026. Who knows? Depending upon how fast these exponential technologies proceed at. So everyone's got to stay up to date with the latest tech tools. I think it's very important for everyone to spend at least 2 to 3 hours a week. It's not too much, but at least 2 to 3 hours a week reading things on technology, digital technologies, digital innovations, attending sessions like this, going and doing shorter programs like the one you have at IIIT Hyderabad, where people can just get exposed to these ideas for 4 to 5, 6 weeks. These are all going to pay dividends in your career journey. You may not see an immediate effect, but it'll keep you at that edge for a long period of time, and it'll help you stay innovative and maybe give you some ideas for how you can improve your own patient practice.
Yeah, I think for the benefit of audience, I would actually like to just explain a bit about the program which you mentioned, which is a postdoctoral entrepreneurship program, PEP. It's a very interesting program where one can actually bridge the gap between academia to entrepreneurship, and they can get their hands dirty on the technology solutions. So anyone who come from a healthcare background can actually try. And of course, we have research going on at IIIT and can take the support from faculties and the research which is done on multiple technologies like AI, ML, NLP, and few more. So So yeah, please do watch that space. So I'm moving ahead to my next question, and then we would open it up for the other audience too for Q&A. So please keep your questions ready. So my last question would be, so I think Dr. Marcus, you have built, platforms for corporates. And so if I may ask, what do you think there is a secret formula to get to the corporate as customer for digital health startup? Because we do have a couple of digital health startups in our incubation space, and how do you crack that sort of thing, and of course further continue their engagement?
B2B versus B2C as customer acquisition models, there are pros and cons on each side.
Right.
One has to really think about what is the business intent by which you're building. Now, of course, with B2B, the clear advantage is once you get access into a potential account, then your ability to scale and grow becomes much easier. But it's associated with very long sales cycles, with many decision makers that keep moving amongst the industry between jobs, and therefore they take that opportunity with them where they go, etc. So what I found is it's like running a marathon, and I think about how I run a marathon. It's a long game, and that's how you need to think about this particular industry. It's about cultivating relationships. It's about creating value for them, not looking at it as a transaction, but as a value creator over a long period of time, and understanding that it requires a significant amount of upfront investment in time and resources. Once you're able to convince that particular decision maker that there's a benefit to accrue to their organization, then it naturally flows that you get onboarded, and they will make maybe a pilot opportunity available to you. If you do that well, then they'll extend that out, they'll extend that further out, etc. So it's a long process that requires a particular sales mentality and a very customer-centric, service-centric approach. So as long as you have that in mind, then you'll be well placed for it.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I mean, one will have to really see the patient-driven or the customer-driven outcome. So then the adoptions will be much more easy. And so I would like to ask the participants if there's any questions. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can just put it on the chat box as well. So I think there is a question. Yeah, Nadeem, you would like to ask your question?
Yeah. So
right.
Thank you, Sonali, for arranging this, and thank you, Dr. Marcus, for actually taking out time. So I have one specific question in mind. So you did mention a couple of gaps with regards to, say, the focus not being on primary health and not being on prevention. However, with data also, there's one particular question that I have is with the fact that there's no data is trapped in multiple pockets. I would still say that there is still a lot of data available that can be leveraged, but the problem is that it is not data which is stuck in a healthcare ecosystem in a hospital. It's not being used by a startup, and the one that diagnostic data available at a startup is not being leveraged by, say, a pharmaceutical firm. So there's pockets of data, and they're not in a manner that can be traceable, and they're not in a manner that can be interchanged or collaborated with. And that, if you see it from a resourcefulness point of view rather from a resources point of view, we have the resources or data available to an extent, but the connection or the collaboration is not happening. Do you see that to be a white space that can be targeted in any form whatsoever?
No, absolutely. Data interoperability and an exchange is critical to solving the problem of health. I mean, just look at our lives, right? I've got an Apple Watch, which is giving me all the sort of health information that I need from this. I wear a CGM device on my tricep, which is giving me my sort of cytosolic blood glucose levels, etc. And then I may have an Aura ring, which I wear around sleep, etc. But none of those devices are talking to each other. And I've been frustratingly trying to export the data in some sort of CSV format and speaking to the manufacturers and saying, how can I extract this and then try and sync them? They just don't talk. And that's because, again, it's the incentive, right? Apple has built a mini ecosystem. They don't want to share that API with anyone, right? A device like any CGM device, of course, it's an FDA approved device. So then they have issues around extracting that data, exporting the data for different licenses for different markets, etc. So we, as a society level, need to figure out a way of creating, number one, the exchange, But then number two is how then do we create a financial model that allows for these things to talk to one another? And one of the things that I am most passionate about, and I'm trying to do it with a business that I co-founded based out of Estonia called Roots.life, is utilizing NFT tokenization system wherein the individual becomes the holder of the value of that data. And then she or he is then incentivized over a period of time to share it with different stakeholders, right? So if Facebook wants to use it to market a certain type of health product, I can make it available, but I want to be incentivized and rewarded in that process. And if I want to share that information with Apple or with Fitbit or anyone else, then I can do it, but it's a timestamp through NFT. So I think this whole idea of the blockchain and the shared ledger and now the tokenization system is a positive step in that direction. And now what entrepreneurs need to do is figure out how we can create business models to sit on top of that. Right? There's a lot of feedback loop coming from some. Yeah. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Nadeem.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I think it was a great talk, Marcus, Ranney, and thanks, Dr. Sonali, for this wonderful platform for integration of medicine and technology. So, as we know, digital technology is getting a great way into healthcare. So, a few arenas I would like to just highlight. One, I think you were talking about the remote monitoring applications, right, of wearable devices.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So there is a thin line between these medical devices which are wearable and probably the devices which just monitor your vitals, like your steps and your the heart rate and all that. So what is the differentiation? Which comes under medical category devices, or they do come like Fitbit bands and they have just monitoring of regular vitals are there? And you have other monitoring devices coming up, like fetal monitoring devices, or heart rate, and wearable devices that you go. So what are your thoughts on these remote monitoring devices, and how are you building the ecosystem in remote monitoring of patients?
I think our understanding is ever evolving with that. And as it evolves, increasingly more and more of these will move from the medical sphere to the consumer sphere, right? Again, I don't mean to promote Apple in any way, but just look at the watch on the hand. The ECG is now available to anyone who owns the Apple device, right? Whereas even 10 years ago, the ECG was only in the realm of the cardiologist and the physician, right? Now, through the AI, it can tell you if you're in sinus rhythm or if you're in AF. And over the next few years, I'm sure that algorithm will continue to improve. You'll see ventricular ectopics. You'll see other forms of,
definitely.
all of these things. So I think that is an extension. It's a continuum, and where we draw the line is a very arbitrary line based upon the ubiquity, the accessibility, and the inference that we can do on that particular data set. Same with the sleep rings, right? Typically, it was otherwise just sort of plethography in sleep labs. Now, so many people are now owning these sleep devices that can measure their sleep quality, REM sleep, etc. So I think in the next 10, 12 years, it'll be very ubiquitous for even things like the fetal monitors sitting on a pregnant lady's stomach at home. Obviously, as I understand, the new Apple Watch has a glucose monitoring device built into it. The current one already has the pulse oximeter built into it. So I think it's going to be very interesting, for doctors or medical students.
Let's see who is that.
Definitely. And we have the newer models. I was just checking out the model also for this AI-based facial recognition for mental health disorders. How we use the.
Okay. She's getting ready. She's taking bath, and auntie is also
Hi,
going
can you
to
mute Susmita, please? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. How the AI is also using in face recognitions and facial changes for mental health disorders. This was a new topic which is also coming up with AI in healthcare. There are so many avenues in which it is coming in.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, you also had a question on that, what sort of class it falls in. So it completely depends on what medical device you're working on. So class A, B, C, D, based on how, the invasiveness and how risk associated with it. So based on that, it's very, very defined on the medical device industry, that which yeah.
So do you have a space in which you kind of work out when somebody has a conceptual idea in this technology? Is there a space in which we have the tech and engineering team who will help us to guide to create an conceptual idea in healthcare? Is there a space arena?
I'm sure we would be in a position to help you. You can definitely email me your specific requirement. I mean, this is what wonderful. We do at OJAS. Yeah, you are based out of Prashant?
I'm Chennai. Okay. So I'm an ophthalmologist by my profession. I was working in a remote area in Arvindai Hospital in Pondicherry for a period of time, and then I'm in Chennai. So I also involved in tech arenas, both in virtual reality and making in telehealth applications, as well as in a little bit in 3D printing.
Sure, we would be happy to help.
I would love to connect to see on what best we could do, because I had a model of this fundus imaging system concept that could be built in a very cost-effective, portable way. So I would see if I could.
Sure, I'll put my coordinates, so you can please
lovely.
reach out over email and call as well. So we can.
That'd be great.
So moving on, any other questions from the participants?
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks, Marcus. That was a wonderful session, and thanks, Sonali, also. So, interoperability is one part of the story. We're talking about like IoT devices and data in silos and all of that. What do we do about, all this unstructured data, or let's say, all these handwritten clinical notes and prescriptions which are handwritten? I mean, how do you, that is another very big area, because if that is not there, then it doesn't really complete the rest of the data pockets, So how do we, one is, what are your views on that? I mean, when is that gonna get structured? And the second thing is it on doctors to actually digitize their data, and how do you incentivize them to actually digitize? That was my question.
Yeah, there are a lot of very, very clever people working on this idea globally, in fact. And I've seen some very interesting innovations coming in. My favorite is actually a little device which sort of looks like an Echo, which sits in the corner of a doctor's clinic. And it's continuously listening into the conversation, and it's automatically transcribing that and uploading it into a cloud, right? If you think about the pain points, currently one of the big pain points is the data entry. Of course, I remember in med school, and we had this thing called the COW, which it literally stood for computer on wheels. That was my first job my first job was in intensive care, and I, as the house officer in London, used to have to wheel this computer on wheels around from one bed to the next bed to the next bed, as our consultant would be looking at all the charts at the end of the patient bed and dictating out what the plan was, and I would be typing it away into this 586 type of computer. It wasn't even a laptop, it was actually a PC in those days, right? So obviously I know it's come a long way, but we've got physician assistants and all of those things. I think data entry is a big thing, and so what I'm most excited about is this automated way of capturing it, so that we put less emphasis on the doctor. The second is, once you capture the data, what do you do with it? Right? Even if you look at the people now who are using things like the Microsoft Health Vault or the Google Plan or any of those other digitization services which are available in India, it's scanning the data and it's putting it onto the cloud, but you have to do something with the data. Otherwise, it just sits there. May as well sit in the cupboard.
Utilization of it. Yeah. There are no learnings. There are no insights.
Yeah. So that's the second problem to solve. So one is the data entry. The second is actually mining the data to come up with interesting insights, which goes back to the doctor or the patient, which will help improve their lives. So it starts to close the loop. And the third piece is then on the financial incentivization, right? And let's be honest, there are a lot of incentives out there for doctors not to put their clinical decisions on a piece of paper or into a computer. Either that's because of the big pharma, or it's because of kickbacks, or it's because of relationships that they have with different companies, etc. So there are many incentives which need to be broken and realigned, and including how insurance begins to play its part in all of these things. So, I think if rather than having one company trying to solve everything, as every entrepreneur, I think it's always helpful to try and identify one problem that you're going to solve really, really well, and then be part of a collaborative ecosystem to then help the entire chain grow. So think about how, where you would want to play, and then how we could address those.
Right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
A very interesting answer, Dr. Marcus. I would like to add, we had a startup called Talk.ai, where they are actually capturing the conversational AI. It was based on the conversational AI. So the NLP technology, where the doctor and the patient talking, and it automatically captures the whole conversation and then puts it into a written format. So I think something like this would definitely help. But then again, being in India, I mean, there are so many languages. So of course,
actually, so true.
So actually, making, but I'm sure, the technology can be definitely, scaled to that level also.
Yeah, I'm less worried about language because of two things. One is healthcare, or the language of medicine is almost universal, right? Tuberculosis is still tuberculosis, whether you're speaking Hindi or something else. And the other thing is now, folks like Amazon and all these other Google, they have now begun to get very good at vernacular and other language recognitions. So that capability is there. We just need to apply it in the right context.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
So moving on, any further questions? So if there are no questions, and I'll definitely have many questions. So how do you see for a doctor, or a researchers, while doing their, studies, what else they can do apart from, just thinking about the research or the problem statement they are solving, or in the MBBS, understanding more, what else they should do? I mean, of course, I'm going back to the skill set question itself, because, I really see that initial years, like when you are doing your 5 years of grad or 5 years of PhD, you really have a lot of time to do many other things, except apart from what you're doing. So you did mention, a couple of things, but then if you also want to be involved very hands-on, what else they can do? They can associate with some startup, or what else they should be doing?
Yeah, experiment. I think experiment on self and see where that leads you, right? Whether it means, building your own little model or idea, or talking to entrepreneurs and working with them. It's every time you do an experiment, you learn something in the process, and the vast majority of them fail. That's what good science is about. But until you test a hypothesis, you won't get any further information in return. So what I have a pet peeve about is people who just think that ideas are everything. I remind people that it's ideas mean nothing. They're valueless. It's the execution which is where the success is in life. So you may have the best ideas, but if it's sitting in a notepad somewhere, it really is not helping anyone. So get out there, try it out, make some mistakes, talk to people, invest a little bit of money. If you want to build something, it's okay, because you never know where those dots connect back to you later in life, and how you will learn through that process for it. So yeah, definitely experiment.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a couple of such.
So in the same pattern, what we followed for the valuation of an effect. So what would be the valuation methodology for royalty? Is there any structure or mechanism for royalty also?
I'm not sure if we get the question clearly.
I can't hear you at all, Mahesh.
Mahesh, can you repeat your question, or you can put it on the chat box?
Sonali, we already have a question from someone.
So let me take that question. How can we bring the urbanization health sector to organized by using technology? Unorganized health sector. I'm sorry. It is how can we bring the unorganized health sector to organized using technology?
And what would be an example of that?
This is a question from, I'm sorry, I don't get the name. Yeah. My phone, that's the name coming. Can you please unmute yourself and, give a detailed understanding of the question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
The question is like there's a lot of the tier 2, tier 3 cities in India and a lot of rural population, and there are so much of if you see any town or any tier 2, tier 3 cities, so a lot of unorganized health sector is there. We are talking a lot of data analytics and artificial intelligence. Until we automate this sector to on some certain kind of a format by using technology, we can't achieve an overall growth into the healthcare technology. So how can we bring these unorganized healthcare companies to an organized format? So how the technology can grow to that area? What kind of initiatives can work out?
I think one of the biggest challenges we have as entrepreneurs in India is our market size, right? Whenever we're building a deck, we talk about 1.4 billion Indians. And that's not the truth at all. India is probably 10 Indias. So even now when I work with my startups and I've got a couple of my own ventures and I sort of mentor others as well, we really look at who is that Indian that you're targeting? Because there's a 1 million number in India right at the top of the pyramid. You've then got a 10 million, you've got 100 million, you've got a billion. And that's probably the biggest or the largest categorization that you can do. But even within that, you can begin to slice and dice that very effectively. So when one talks about the unorganized sector and the 70% of India living in rural or tier 2, tier 3, I think that's a very, very different market that requires a very, very different type of technological solution, which unfortunately requires government to play a much bigger role because of the reach and the last mile impact that is needed in those circumstances, right? It's much easier for me sitting in Mumbai to build and design a product for 10 million urban, middle class, Sec A/Sec B Indians, because I know that mentality. I know how to reach those group of people. I know the price point. I know the influencer, and I can sell to them. But if I'm trying to build something for 100 million Indians, I can't do that because I will not know where they are, how to approach them, what device they're going to be using, what their electricity bandwidth is, what their broadband connection is, all of those things. So I know I haven't answered your question directly, but I'm trying to give it in a sense that we at an entrepreneurial level need to really decide who is our market and be very, very specific. Even now with the products that I build, like we're building a new application for Human Edge. The challenge I've set my team is I want you to build it just for 1,000 users. I don't care if more than 1,000 users don't use it. Because if I can get 1,000 users to pay me $1,000 a year, then suddenly that becomes $1 million business for me, right? And you first focus on that early adopter set, and then you think about how you want to grow it thereafter. So be very, very specific in who you're trying to go after.
That's definitely a very, very important piece of suggestion, Dr. Marcus, you gave, because I see that's definitely not that the clarity is not there when as an entrepreneur, many startups start, they think then, I can really address all of it. And I think that's the majority of people, have failed because of that, that sort of mindset. So you have to be very, very specific, a laser focus on what sector and what segment you want to, address and whose problem you're solving, who's ready to pay for your solution. So I'm sure by doing those calculations and those understanding and insights would definitely help someone.
Exactly, so, because I would just wanted to highlight, because in India, there is for this question, because in India, if you notice, there is a different forms of healthcare delivery systems you have, So for the technology to adapt to these different caters, like you have a general physician having a clinic, you will have a corporate hospital, you have a small mid-size town city health centers, primary health centers, you have medical colleges, you have non-profit organization, institutions. So if you see, there are different levels of healthcare delivery systems in India. And then you have the governmental organizations, So I think technology should be basically adaptive in different healthcare delivery systems, and how it helps to enhance these healthcare delivery systems in solving the solutions to create an impact on the patients. I think that is something that the digital technology should strive to do possible.
Yeah,
thank you.
Agree. I think the collaboration is also the key. I mean, you should definitely go and reach out to people who have a reach for these tier 1, tier 2 cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities, because there are many NGOs who are trying to do that. There's already a government platform, ASHA workers are doing it. So I think one should go and find how they can integrate their solution, what is already existing, then, trying and finding new channels. So that would may help in terms of the early adoption. Yeah, Dr. Marcus, you have.
No, I agree on what you said. I think that's entirely the way we need to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, any other questions from the participants? So would you like to talk a little bit about the book which you have on your book which you have written on human edge? So it would be interesting to know what is exactly, I mean, what would be the summary of the book?
Yeah. Well, firstly, this is what it looks like. I think it's always helpful to know what the cover looks like. Never judge a book by its cover, but at least you can recognize it online this way. It's all about the limits of human physiology and performance. So there are 6 main chapters: a chapter on climbing Mount Everest, a chapter on running the full marathon, a chapter on sending a woman to Mars, a chapter on scuba diving to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a chapter on trekking to the South Pole, and a chapter on surviving in the Sahara. And the whole idea is for each of these extreme environments is to showcase to you how beautiful the body is in adapting itself to these most extreme environments. And the vehicle I've used to write the chapter is I put you in the shoes of the protagonist. So it's as if you are climbing Mount Everest. I described to you what base camp is like, camp 1, camp 2, etc. And then as you are summiting the mountain, what is going on internally on a cellular journey inside of your physiology, the effects of high altitude, so hypoxia, hyperbaric hypoxia, low oxygen driven, low pressure driven oxygen, and how that's creating alterations in your ventilation rate, your red blood cell formation, your circulatory system, ultimately your mitochondria to burn fuel. So for all the medics out there, I'm sure you'll really enjoy it because it's a deep dive into aspects of translational and applied physiology in some very beautiful settings. And then the last chapter there's a chapter on mitochondria because I believe that's the future of medicine. And I talk about intermittent fasting and other aspects of metabolic conditioning to help achieve longevity. And the last piece is on mind over matter, which is ultimately the power of the brain and the mind, the subconscious mind, in allowing your body to achieve these incredible different feats of human endurance.
Wow, I mean, it's really like something, I mean, one should definitely read and it looks very interesting. So I think are you saying that we basically perform better on a stress condition?
Sorry?
I mean, our mind tend to work better on a stress condition because all these are actually, I see these are not normal situation, right? You are on a stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So Harmeet, so a short amount of stress is very good for the human body. It's why intermittent fasting is great, right? The idea of autophagy, which is creating small stresses on the body, which we learn from, and it becomes much stronger. The big problem we have is chronic stress. And that leads to all the problems, metabolic, neurodegenerative, other chronic diseases that we see. So that's when chronic disease, chronic stress takes over. But otherwise, hormesis, which is the application of a short defined periods of stress, is very good for the body.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's why I think we say this, that, you know, people do perform better on a stress situation like exams or interviews. So I agree with you. So any other questions from the participants? You won't get this, you know, this time again. Is it a question? Yeah, we have 500 plus healthcare tech companies working on diagnostic software in India. Still, why India doesn't have metrics of diagnostic results? Where is the gap, and what is the solution?
I don't think it's just India, by the way. I think this is a global issue, and I'll give you a very easy example, right? Because we got a lot of medics on the call. If I were to ask any medic out there, what is the normal range of AST, amino transferase, a liver enzyme, they may recognize that the upper range of normal in most lab results is between 45 to 50. That's the cutoff, right? If you look back historically, that number in 1972 was 25. A lab result is basically the normal distribution of a population, right? And so what has happened in the last 40 years is collectively our liver enzymes have worsened. We have moved the needle from 25 being the upper range of normal to now, in some instances, in some labs, being higher than 50. And that's because of just derangement of liver enzyme, principally because of the absorption and consumption of too much sugar, right? So even now, when I design my metabolic panel for the people that I work with, even for myself, I hold myself to very high regard. So I just did my blood test 2 weeks ago, and I was very happy to see my AST was at 24. The last time I did it when I had COVID, just after having COVID, and I know I was on steroids for that, it was at around 60. So I was clearly having a degree of liver strain and stress, hepatocyte, mitochondrial dysfunction. But now I'm very happy that through intermittent fasting and another range of metabolic changes that I've made in my life, my uric acid is down, my AST is down, my visceral fat, as I measured on a body composition analyzer, is very, very low. So I think this is a standardization that we need to do across society, where between labs, between equipment, between tests, between countries, we need to arrive at a particular number. And it's very hard because the Indian level is going to be very different to the Caucasian level. And this is a big challenge for people working in genomics, right? All of the genomic literature is based on the Caucasian middle class Sec A to Sec B genopool. It's not based on that Indian that's living in a rural village somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, right? And so we need to actually create a genomic bank for India to understand which are the SNPs which are useful for us. How do we then, use that information to our advantage? So I think big data is going to be a big area of growth and of utility for us. And we'll see it in diagnostics, we'll see it in genomics, we'll see it in all the other omics which exist out there, including the wearable omics and all of those things. So I think it's really interesting the way this is going to play out over the next 10, 20 years for us. Yeah.
We've already reached, there's just 2 minutes, but there is a question, and maybe this is good, to conclude. What are the steps you advise to follow to the new entrepreneurs?
Start small, start today. It's like any behavioral change journey that I talk about. There are 3 rules: start small, start today, stack them up, and celebrate the wins. So what that means is define your problem and make it even smaller than it is. Make it to the smallest possible unit of change that you can target, and think about how you can do that today itself, right? Don't think about what I'm going to do next month, what I'm going to do next year. Actually begin to do that today. Experiment with yourself. Number 2 is create a journey. So when you've achieved success on one, what is the natural next step? What is the natural next step? What is the natural next step? Don't try run a marathon from day one. You're not going to do it. I've been there, and I've learned the hard way. It takes 9 months to train to run the 42 kilometers. So make your plan in the same way. Chart out your series of small steps and get executing on that. And the third is celebrate the wins, because there are lots of failures. So every time you win, make sure you celebrate it in some way, shape, or form to give yourself the encouragement and give your team the encouragement to keep going through that process.
Yeah, great. Those are great insight. I just want to add one more thing on the starting your venture. If that was the question, please do spend a lot of time on the idea and the problem validation itself, because that's like 50% of job is done, because once you really identify your problem using a lot of design thinking, putting yourself on the stakeholders, empathizing with the person who's going to be your customer, I think a lot more adoption would be easier, a lot more. So do follow the design thinking approach, in building your solution. And definitely one piece of advice which goes without saying, start with the problem, not the technology which you have. Technology can be just it can be leveraged to solve those biggest challenges, but you do not start because you have a technology to look for a problem. Yeah. So with that, any other concluding statement, Dr. Marcus?
No.
It's been amazing to hear you, and I'm sure 1 hour is very less, to hear so many stories which you have. We'll definitely have a few more sessions with you. And I think the entrepreneurs and the startups which are incubated with us, and even the now ones who are participants, would definitely have got so much learning from this session, and yeah, coming in the future too.
Thank you so much for having me. All the very best to all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marcus. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Please tune and keep watching this space. And please do write us for any other queries you have. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, Sonali.